CSIS 2440 is filmed before a live studio audience.
Okay, here we are. Day one, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. What does that have to do with PHP? What it has to do with it is you have to know that stuff. Okay, so I have three assumptions. Assumption number one, you know HTML really well, really well. Assumption number two, you know CSS really well. Assumption number three, you know JavaScript pretty well. Okay enough that you know what a variable is, you know what a loop is, you know what a branch is, you know the basic structure of how to write the code. You don't have the language mastered. I don't think anybody on the planet, even the creators of JavaScript, have the language mastered, okay? But you have to have a little bit of programming experience. So if you feel uncomfortable with any of those things, then you'll need to play catch up. You can go watch my old videos if you want, my 1430 videos to help you stay caught up on all that, okay? All right, next up, the approach we're taking here is just for today. I'm gonna just throw a handful of spaghetti at the wall and hope some of it sticks. Okay, I'm not expecting you guys to master anything today. The real goal is to get you to see how this all works. You should have watched the video and already set up your local server. What I want to make sure you understand is how does the server work on your local machine, and we'll not worry too much about the remote for right now. So thing number one, you guys all have XAMPP set up hopefully, and just like in HTML, if you go to a folder, what is the default file that a web browser looks for inside of a folder? Index.html, right? Now, if there is an index.php, it will find that one. It'll find them both, and depending on the way your server's set up, it'll default to one or the other. It doesn't delete anything, it just uses one or the other. Most of the time, if it's a PHP server, it's going to find the PHP and go with it, right? So, at the moment, PHP is turned off on my machine. I have the XAMPP server is shut down, so I have no servers running that I'm aware of for XAMPP. So I'm going to show you what happens if I try to go to my local host. I click on right here, and I've got a separate folder. You can see there on the screen, the CSIS 2440 at the top there. That's where all my projects are going to go for this class, all right? But localhost, if you recall from the video, that is the root. That's like your, my stonecoldmagic.com or whatever your website is .com. Localhost is that, okay? So in the localhost, there is an index file. And if we go there, which when I have PHP running, it would actually redirect to their dashboard page. That's the way the PHP code is written there, okay? So let's make sure before you do anything, and when you're coding in PHP, turn on your server, okay? Because if it's not on locally, you can't code. You can't code PHP, right? So let's turn it on. And I'm just going to click Start on Apache and Start on MySQL. Some of you might have it set to automatically start, and that's fine. And then if you're on a Windows machine, you can actually close the window and it'll just stay open in your little thing down here. On a Mac, you don't want to do that. It'll actually shut it down. But now if I refresh, bam, we are on the redirected page for localhost, or in my case, CSIS 2440. There we are. Now notice that I don't have any files being displayed. I don't have a file running. I'm seeing my actual folder here. And if you have your live server set up without an index file, this is what happens, that's just no good. That's bad security, right? So we need to make sure I have an index file in my CSIS 2440. Because this is local on my machine, I'm not going to bother. Okay, and you'll see why, because I'm going to be putting a whole bunch of files in here that are different for every day's lecture. But for now, we're going to create one that's called code or something just for today. So I'm going to open up my editor here, and I'm just going to File, Save As, and then XAMPP. Now this is the key part though, htdocs. The htdocs folder is the root of where you go. When you type in stonecoldmagic.com or whatever your website is, that it goes to the htdocs folder looking for the files. Okay, that is the root. So when you type localhost, it goes right there. Okay, so here we go. I'm inside of htdocs, and now I have a separate folder called 2440. There it is, and we're going to call this day1.php. Before we write a single line of code, how do we feel about everything I just mentioned so far? Hopefully the video that you watched, this was just a recap anyway. Okay, feel okay? So the big picture here is we want to develop on our local machines and then we want to upload it to a server. Okay? You don't want to develop it and then have to upload it before you can even test it. You want to test it locally. Okay. Any questions about any of that? All right, so let's write our first line of code here. And by let's write, I mean watch me write it. Okay, because my goal here is to just explain what it does. Okay, and PHP has there's lots of purposes, but two big ones are, we'll say, to generate HTML. No, not that. Autocomplete. This is why I don't like autocomplete, guys. And to process web forms. Okay? Generates HTML and processes web forms. Those are the two big things that you'll ever do with PHP, ever. Those are the biggest things, okay? Process web forms comes later. Today we're just going to generate HTML, okay? Here's how you do it. You open up, we'll call it a tag, a PHP tag, and in between there, you put PHP code. I'm going to put a simple line of code here. Don't worry about what it means at the moment. I'll show you in just a few minutes. But we're going to say, happy birthday. All right. And that is a line of PHP code. That's it. Okay. Notice what I have here inside of the echo statement. That's just raw HTML. Okay. This line of code that's on your screen right now, the whole line, is literally the equivalent of that in HTML. They're identical. They do exactly the same thing. Okay, so to prove that, I'm going to run this page here. So now if I refresh here, it should show up in my list. There it is, day one. I click on it, and there it just says happy birthday. And in fact, if you hit Control U and you look at the actual code the browser sees, it just sees that. That's all it sees. Okay. So all PHP did for us just now was generate plain old HTML. Well, what's the point of that? Right? I can handwrite HTML. I don't need PHP to do it for me. That's extra code. We'll get to that in just a second. Okay. But I want to make sure this big picture is clear. Now, at the moment, the server that we're talking about is on this laptop. Normally, we're talking about a server that's remote, that somebody's going to your website and the server's in Canada or wherever, right? So when they go to your web page, they ping your server, and we're going to talk about how all that works the next time we meet. But they ping your server, and when they ping it, it actually finds the PHP file and interprets it and converts it to plain old HTML. And then that plain old HTML is what gets sent back to the browser. So the PHP code never leaves the server. It's never seen in a browser. It's only on the server. And if the server's down, then it can't interpret the PHP. Or if that part of the server's not working, it can't interpret it. But once it interprets it, it just gives you raw HTML, sends that across the internet. Okay, does that make sense? The question was, what is interpreting the PHP code? And it's actually PHP interpreter. That's exactly what it is. So let's go back to our HTML days. When you go to whatever.com, it just goes to the server and grabs something.html and sends back that raw code. Just raw HTML, right? Well, PHP, when you hit the server, it runs the PHP code, turns it into HTML, and then just sends the plain old HTML. So the net effect is identical. If I were to have this sitting on my server or that sitting on my server, either way, that's what gets delivered to the browser, no matter how you look at it, okay? Now, the reason it's a little confusing is because at the moment, the server is sitting on the same machine as the web browser, right? But it's still going to my server somewhere on my laptop, interpreting it, and then transferring and sending it back as plain old HTML. Okay, does that clarify a little bit? The question is, why does it all run on the server? A couple of reasons. Thing number one, if it didn't run on the server, then that means everybody's computer on the planet would have to have PHP installed on it. Just like JavaScript, which nowadays it's so ubiquitous that JavaScript, it is on every computer, with very rare exception. By the way, there was a time when I used to write web code where that was not, you could not rely on that. You could not. Nobody liked JavaScript. They were afraid of it because it's their machine doing stuff that I tell it to, right? Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, with PHP, you're using passwords and stuff to get into databases and all kinds of stuff that you don't want people seeing that code at all. And so you just need your server to be set up with PHP, and then the whole world can see it because it doesn't matter what their computer does. They're pinging a computer that is running PHP, right? And so you do all this scripting stuff on the back end, and then all is said and done, it just generates a nice raw HTML page. So let's look at why you'd want to do this though, because this is silly. I mean, what's the point of doing that when I could just do that, right? What's the point? Well, let's just start really simple. And this is where hopefully your JavaScript experience will come in a little bit. Let's start with something like this. I'm going to set a variable here, and here's your first exposure to the weirdness of PHP. All variables in PHP start with a $sign. In like Bash and like all the programming languages from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Yeah, this is just an old callback to that. Now, in Java, if you're going to create a variable, what do you say? You say, if you guys know Java. If you don't, that's okay. But if it's an int, you say int. If it's a char, you say char, right? In JavaScript, you say var, or if you're a little bit more experienced, you know about let and maybe const, okay? Which we'll talk about those later in the semester. In PHP, you say that, $sign. That's it. So we're going to create a variable called day, and I'm going to set it equal to Monday. All right. Now, what is today? Monday? Yeah, today's Monday. So we'll use Monday. Later, we're going to learn how to get the actual day of the week by using a function, right? Okay. Now, I would highly, highly recommend you do not try to code along with me here because I want to just show you how this works, and then later you're going to have a chance to do some code today, okay? So here's what I want to do. It's saying happy birthday, and then right after that, I'm going to say if day is equal to Monday, then we're going to also echo, and echo is just like print, if you're familiar with that. Or in JavaScript, we use, alert or console.log or document, get element by ID, and you put it to the DOM or whatever. Okay, we're going to say, let's go with bummer. It's Monday. Okay. Now, before I run this code, conceptually, this should all be not new, right? The only thing that should be new to you is echo, right? The way we declare the variable is new, but it's still a variable, right? Day equals Monday. In fact, in JavaScript, it would look like that, and it would look like that without the $sign there, okay? Yes, sir. Yeah, so the question was, if I were to do this in JavaScript, then this would be reallocating memory, and it's making a new variable called day, and it's as if the variable's never been initialized. So in reality, you'd want to do that. You'd want to declare it here, and then you want to show it here, right? Well, but with PHP, we seem to be declaring it here and redeclaring it right there, okay? But we're not redeclaring it. We're actually never really declaring it. You're just calling it as if it already exists. Now, that's not entirely 100% true. Okay, there are cases where if you try to if like somewhere down here I said something like echo Bob, I might get an error saying what's Bob. I also may not. Depends on the context, all right? That is the joy of loosely typed languages. And I love that, actually, believe it or not. I love that feature. Just like JavaScript, this is a loosely typed language. And so in 3 seconds from here, I could change this from day equals, 7, right? The data types don't matter because it just figures them out. And so there's lots of little quirky, weird things like that. And you'll find exceptions along the way. But basically, you're not really declaring a variable. Now, there's been some changes to one of the version 7s of PHP, 7 point whatever, and where you can do some of this stuff, where you can be more explicit and explicitly declare it. We're probably never going to use that in the class, but you'll see. We'll run into a few cases as we go along for sure, yeah. So the question is, if I decided to say echo Bob, and Bob doesn't exist as a variable, what is the default value of Bob? Let's run this and see what happens, okay? So let's get over here and refresh the page. And we get the error right there that I was expecting, all right? But before we look at the error, notice this. It did say bummer, it's Monday because today's Monday. And let's just change this to something that's not Monday and refresh it. And that goes away. Right? Simple if statement, nothing we haven't seen before. So in this case, you can't manipulate a variable if you haven't at least mentioned it somewhere in your code beforehand, right? So if I just up here just said Bob, I'm pretty sure that's enough right there. And, oh, sorry, I apologize, equals something. That's what I meant to do. And that should be enough right there to get rid of that error message. So it's hard to explain because, yeah, I mean, I just had to declare Bob, but it seems like I'm still declaring it because I'm using the $sign. So here's the way it really works. PHP knows that the first time you set it a value equal to a value, that's the declaration. That's it. As soon as you use the assignment operator once, it knows that you've just declared it, right? Okay, so let's get rid of Bob here, and let's put this back to Monday. Fabulous. So again, why would we want to do this? Why would we want to use PHP code? Well, this is a silly, simple reason. Maybe you want to display a different message every day of the week for HTML. So here's the big message of the day, folks. Your reason for using PHP is while you're on the server, you want to dynamically generate your raw HTML. So in other words, if we didn't have PHP, on Monday, you would have to make a page that says, today's Monday, have a great day. And then on Tuesday, you'd have to come in and edit your code and say, today's Tuesday, have a great day on Tuesday. And then right every day, you'd have to change that. Well, you already know JavaScript, you can inject into the DOM and change stuff like that. Well, PHP's generating the DOM, right? PHP is creating the HTML that gets sent to your browser, and then the browser shows that in the DOM, right? So again, the idea is use code to generate HTML. JavaScript does not do that. Yeah, JavaScript can generate HTML, you can do that, but JavaScript, mainly you're using it to manipulate HTML that's already been delivered from the server. And even if you use JavaScript to print all of your code, if you've done the tic-tac-toe program, you saw we generated the tic-tac-toe board completely in JavaScript. But I still injected it into a body tag, right? So there's still some HTML there. That was still delivered from the server. And then JavaScript manipulated that. So the idea of this is rather than you having to hand code all your HTML raw, you have some PHP that does some magic for you. It's really all it is, okay? So again, I want to show you this though. If we go back and refresh this where it says Monday, look at the HTML code. That's it. It's just the raw code that, as if you typed that. It's exactly the same thing, right? Dig it?
I dig Sugar Smack.
Couple things. Thing number one, every one of your HTML files you've ever written in your entire life, do this if you want to. Go to them right now and rename them to .php and change nothing else. And they will still run perfectly normally. PHP will, if I run it just like that, this is the HTML now, I'm going to refresh, and it will still generate exactly that. I just refreshed it, nothing changed, okay? So in PHP files, you don't even have to write PHP code. You can just write plain old HTML. But we're not going to do that because what's the point of that, okay? Think about what's going on here. If this were an HTML page, what's wrong with that? What we're looking at right now. What's wrong with it? Yeah, no doc type, no HTML tag, no head tag, no body tag, none of that stuff, right? That's a problem, okay? So let's fix that. I can go right up here and I can just put plain old HTML. And I could put HTML here, and then I could put my head tag and my title tag, and it's going to be day 1. So I have the body tag. This right here, isn't that part of the body? It's just that. It's just the H1 and the happy birthday message. That's all it is. That is the body right there. Okay? And then we're going to close the body. The body. Sorry about that. All right. And if you're on the headphones, sorry about that. I probably blew out your eardrums. Okay. This is completely 100% legitimate and 100% valid HTML code and PHP code. When all is said and done, my server is going to deliver that to the browser. That's it. PHP goes away. Bye-bye. Okay, let's check it out, make sure it's working here. Refresh. And there it looks a little different because I added the proper structure to it. But now when I look at the code, there you go. That's exactly, now it's not as formatted as nicely as if it were raw HTML. But that is the raw HTML you would have written to get this. Okay, that's the big message for the day, folks. How do we feel about that? We good? Questions? The question is, can I make it a little bit prettier in my format? And you can, and I can show you how to do that. You don't really need to because the only code you look at is this code, right? The one that's on the screen. You don't look at you never see this code, right? You never look at, you never edit that code because you edit this. So as long as this is readable to you as a programmer, because that's important, it does need to be readable for sure. As long as it's readable, then you're okay. All right, next up, another important thing to understand is that you can open and close PHP anytime you want. So like right now, again, if you're familiar with JavaScript, if you remember that, you know how to write a function, right? Okay. So let's say I want to have a function. I'm going to write down here. I'm going to create a function, just like you do in PHP in JavaScript. You put the word function, and we're going to say stuff. That's all it's going to do. Now I have another opening of a PHP down here at the bottom, but I've opened PHP here, closed stuff, and then I reopen it over here. And now down here, I'm just going to say echo say stuff. Or actually, I don't even need to say echo. It's just going to print out say stuff. There we go. So let's run that real quick, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Stuff. Okay. What's going on here? Well, I have this PHP code here, and it says, hey, run this function called say stuff. All it knows is that function is somewhere else in the PHP code. It could be anywhere. It could have put it just right here. That'd be fine too, okay? But I have it separate. Eventually, we're going to put it in separate files, right? But for now, it's all right here. And by the way, this maybe is inside of a div or a dove, whatever, same thing in my world anyway, okay? And so that's this one right here. So maybe I've got this one div here that does something. And then I have some other, maybe I have like an H1 at the top here. H1 that says hello. And then down here, I have a paragraph that says howdy. And then I decide, oh, I need to do something with HTML again, right? Or with PHP again. So I can open up another instance of PHP right here. Okay, in fact, let's do something fun, like a loop. Okay, so with a loop, what kind of loops do we know about? Do whiles or while loops, right? For loop, for each loop, right? Okay, so let's look at a for loop because that's the same, the syntax is the same as JavaScript. So for, now you have to declare your variable, your counter. I always use X when I'm writing PHP for some reason. And then as long as X is less than 4, and then we'll increment X, okay? If you're not familiar with what's going on right there on line 22, then go back and watch the JavaScript videos on my playlist, and I'll give them to you if you don't know where those videos are, okay? For the for loop here, we're gonna just say, actually outside of this, so here's a good use case for doing nesting in PHP like this. I'm gonna make an unordered list, okay? So I'm opening and closing the unordered list tag, and then inside of here, I'm going to echo, and we'll say li list item number. I'm going to freak some of you out right now. X. Believe it or not, that's totally valid code right there. Yeah, it's trippy. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute, okay? But this, what's this going to do? It's going to make 4 LIs. And it's going to have, each one's going to say item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. It's actually going to say 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Let's change it so it doesn't do that. We'll go 1. There. So now it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So let's refresh it. And there we go. List item 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you look, all it is raw HTML code that it generated. This all happened on the server, and the server delivered this raw code to the browser. But we did it with a loop. Okay? That can come in handy, right? You can see how that could be useful, especially when you start learning how to take stuff out of a database. Okay? Now remember, This is the spaghetti lecture, right? It's the only one that's going to be like this. If some of this is flying over your head, don't panic. I'm just exposing it to you, right? I'm not teaching anything at the moment. I'm exposing you to stuff, okay? Eventually, I'll be teaching specifically, but today it's just exposing you to the basic idea. All right. So here's, again, a simple loop. Now, if you're confused about what is a loop, or if you need a little refresher on that, then I would suggest you go back again and watch those 1430 JavaScript videos, okay? All right, questions so far? Let's talk about strings. Now think about PHP. If we understand that its main job is to generate HTML. What is HTML? It's just plain text, okay? It's just regular old text. Well, what is text? It's a string. And so the number one thing you're going to do in PHP is manipulate strings, right? You're going to manipulate strings. And so that's the big thing that we're going to do in this course throughout the semester, that we'll be doing that all the time. Okay. So let's start off here. Let's clear off some of this stuff. We'll get rid of the function down here. I want to make this nice and clean. Get rid of the UI, the div, get rid of all this stuff here. All right. Get rid of save stuff so I don't get an error. Okay, so back to this original thing here. Well, I could now just say this. Echo today is day. There you go. Now it's going to say today is Monday, right? So let's refresh it. Close all these extra tabs here. Today is Monday, all right? If I change that to Wednesday, today is Wednesday. What's happening here, this, believe it or not, this is valid code. No other language that I know of, that I've ever used anyway, allows you to put the variable right into the string like that, okay? So I guess the closest thing to that is like printf in Java. If you're familiar with that, it's sort of like this. But this is actually really cool. I like this feature a lot. How do you do that in JavaScript? How would I do this exact same thing in JavaScript? Yeah, I think you said the same thing. Yeah, concatenation, right? So it would look like this, right? Is that what we're familiar with? That's not quite how it works in PHP. Now, the other way I just showed you works, but in our world, to concatenate, we use a dot, okay? And if you've been in my 1430 class live, you may have experienced me accidentally putting a dot in JavaScript because I was thinking I was in PHP at the moment. And I guarantee you that in this class, you're going to see me put a plus sign when I meant to put a dot. So, and my brain is looking at it going, why is it not working? Because I got those backwards. So be careful. Okay, but this will work too. So if I refresh it, this is the same thing. Today is Wednesday. It still works. Now notice this old way we had it though. This is important, guys. If you hear one thing today, hear this. That only works in double quotes. It does not work in single quotes. This little trick, if these were single quotes, that would not work. It would just say day. Yes, sir. Yes, yeah, the question was, can I use a concatenation operator when I use single quotes? And the answer is absolutely. In fact, that's the only way to get that result, is by using the concatenation operator there. So the question then becomes, why one over the other? Yeah, sometimes it's just a matter of it's convenient, more convenient to code that way. Other times, by the way you see it right now on line 14, that is how I always do it, with very rare exception. That's how I prefer to do it, because it works that way in all languages, except it's a plus instead of a dot, but other than that, it's the same. So I prefer this method. But one of the reasons that you will switch quotes is if you say today, let's concatenate more onto this, right? Dot. And I'm going to open the quotes back up. And in there, I'm going to put a period, which is just the period that's the end of the sentence. That's not the dot operator, right? Okay. Today is a fine day. All right. So when I want to have quotes around it, I can't do So if I had this situation going on, let's switch all these back to double quotes, and double quotes. What you can see already by the syntax highlighting, something ain't right. What's going on here is this. At this point, we open a quote, we close it, we concatenate, so far so good, we close, we reopen, and then I'm like, what's going on now? Okay, I got a dot, and today is, that seems good. Then we close the quote, apparently. So PHP thinks that that's the end of the line right there, that we closed it. And then now we have this weird straggler stuff at the end that PHP has. Like, what are you talking about? You just closed the quote right before this. So if you run it, this will give you some errors. Whenever you see something like this, unexpected, it's usually a quote or a semicolon error, most of the time. So let's back it up to the other way, like that. Now, if I wanted to have single quotes around something, I'd just reverse all the quotes, right? I'd make the bulk of the variable inside of double quotes, and I'd put single quotes around the word fine. Okay. Also, if you're familiar with escape characters, escaping a character, I should say, you can do that too. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, we get to it later. Okay? Okay. Last thing I want to mention about strings here for just a moment. I say last thing, but it won't be. What are the data types? If you're familiar with Java or JavaScript, what are the data types? String. Yep. Integer. Now, yeah, so let's long, short, but those are not in our world. Okay, so let's go here first. Right, so string, integer, and float. Now, in the Java world, you have long, short, ints, and bytes, and all this stuff. Those are still all technically an integer, as in a whole number, not a floating point. And then you have floats and doubles, which are also just technically floating points. So in PHP, they're just everything's a floating point. Yeah, all kind of encompassed into one, or it's an integer, or it's a Boolean variable, which is just true and false, right? There are others that, no, actually char is not one, believe it or not. Yeah, the string, it's just a string, yeah. It's a one character string, yeah, one element string. Because strings are actually just arrays, right? And there are these other data types in PHP, which we're going to worry about later. There's object, there's array, and there's null is actually data type, and resource. We'll talk about those another day. For now, this is what we care about. Notice though, anytime, I mentioned this a minute ago, I can make day equal to 10. And now it's no longer a string, it's an integer, right? Just like JavaScript, non-typed language or loosely typed language. Okay, how do we feel about all of that? Strings, concatenation, again, not mastery, just basic big picture. So the question was, where is my P tag for here? And you're right, I forgot to put them in. This is wrong. So let me show you what it looks like when we look at it. Let me fix that. And now, right here, it just says today is a fine day. That's bad HTML. Yeah, it's not correct. The syntax isn't wrong, but it needs to have a tag, right? And so, to fix that, I'm glad you pointed that out. P and P, right there. Yep, that's the way I should have done that. So, nice catch. And now it doesn't look any different, but it now is properly structured here. Got the P tag around it. Yes, and now I can target it with my CSS. And also, if you're using a screen reader, you have to have properly structured HTML, or else the screen reader doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know that that's a paragraph because you didn't tell it it's a paragraph, right? So that's a big use for the tags. That wasn't originally a use, but now that's a big thing. The other big thing that's important as a coder, you have to know how to make comments in your code, right? It's huge. So we'll show you the same standard tool you're probably used to with any language you've ever used, which is this is a multi-line comment that can be as many lines as you want, and then you just, as long as you close it, same way you're probably used to, right? So you open it up with a /* and you close it with a //, okay? Multi-line comments. Single line comment, just like you're used to. But there's a third one in PHP, the octothorpe. This is also a single line comment. Okay. I may be slightly wrong about the history here, but I believe that what happened was they used the octothorpe because that's what most scripting languages used at the time. And then later the double slashes were added because most modern languages use that. So now they're both a thing. So you can use either one. Here's my preference. You guys have all probably done this. You're troubleshooting some code and then you want to comment out a line just so you can test other stuff. When I comment out a line of code, I use the octothorpe. And if I'm making an actual comment, then I use the double slash. The reason for that is, in my code anyway, anytime I see an octothorpe, I know that I was maybe going to re-add that code or just delete it because I don't need it anymore. But I only do that with code. If it's an actual comment, I use double slashes. Okay? That's how I use it, but it doesn't matter. You can use it however you want. Any questions? Because I'm about to show you something that's going to scare you. I do this on date. Let me show you what I do to my 1430 students. I go to like a magic, like one of my sites or something, magicreviewed.com, and then I show them this. I just show them the HTML code. This is 5 minutes after they just learned what a tag was, right? And I show them this, right? Because that's just scary, you know. That's just scary and messy. Yeah. So I'm about to do that same thing to you guys, but with PHP. Okay. So don't panic. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I have a project that I built. It's a family Feud game, okay? And I'm gonna bring it up on the screen here in a minute and show you how it works. But this is in Sublime Text, so the syntax highlighting is a little different. Remember, spaghetti, right? I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall. I'm not expecting mastery on anything, okay? But look what we have here in this PHP file. Here's a function. Who cares what it does, okay? Takes in a value, and it does something with that value, and then it returns something, okay? Here's another function, okay? Takes in some values, does a bunch of crap, and returns some stuff. Don't worry about what it does. This particular function, okay? This one takes in a whole bunch of parameters, which is something you guys should be exposed to already. And look what it returns. It returns mostly HTML, right? It's just returning a form. But what's added, there's a couple of things that are being tacked on that are dynamic variables in the PHP. So when this form gets returned, it's returned with some values that are variables based on the input or whatever the user did or whatever in one condition. Or the else is this, return this plain old form that has no PHP in it, okay? So this is just a whole bunch of functions. Let's take a look at my index file here for this game. Notice that 99.9% of this is just HTML and a little bit of JavaScript, where I get a little call to JavaScript function there. Except for this one line. That's the only PHP in the whole file. And again, don't worry about what the code does. Just know that I have one little teeny line of PHP there, and that just has a bunch of PHP in it somewhere else in another file. Okay? So some pages are more like this, where I'm mostly writing HTML. Right? Now this right here, here's a good example where I could have used a loop. See that? Everybody see how a loop would work on that? Let's just copy this code for a minute. Bring it over here. Let's turn this into a loop. Okay, so let's clear out all this HTML or this PHP. And when I do this all the time in the real world. I'll take raw HTML that I wrote, and then I'll look at it and go, ah, crap, I could be more efficient. So let me turn it into PHP. So I'll literally copy and paste the HTML right here so I can look at it and see what I want to do with it. Okay, so here I am in my PHP. I want to make a loop here. How would I structure this? What do you think? Yeah, we'd put this part in the loop, and we'd put this here. So here's the idea. Let's clean this up a little bit. So what we would have here is we would just print out a select statement, and then we'd print out the closing tag. So if I just ran this in the code real quick, or in the browser, we look inside, and there's actually a select right there. Right? It's a drop-down box. Okay, so our HTML is literally just select, but there's nothing in it. Well, we want to put inside of it that, right? So, but we wanted to do it with PHP. So one simple way, right? This is totally cheating, but let's just do this. Echo, done. right? And by the way, this will give you your nice format you're asking for, Jake. Thank you for the applause. Okay, so if I refresh it now, looks just fine. There's my drop-down list. And if I look at the code, bam, and it's even nicely organized because of what we did in the code, right? But obviously that defeats the purpose, because now if I want to add a 6th one or 7th one, I got to do that, right? Okay, so what we really want is something that's going to dynamically create that. And again, guys, I keep saying it, but spaghetti. I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall. If some of it's flying over your head, it's okay. I just want to make sure basic concepts are sticking, okay? Okay, so let's make a loop. I'm just going to copy one of these, because I only need one, because I'm going to change pieces of it. So here we go. For x is equal to 1, and as long as x is less than or equal to 5, then we're going to say x plus plus. Okay, now all I want to do is echo that. That's almost what we want. I mean, we're almost done. So let's just leave that for a moment. Watch what happens. Refresh this, and now what's it going to be when I look at the drop-down list when I refresh it? Game 1, game 1, game 1, game 1, right? How do I fix that? Easy. Just replace that with x. That's it. So we're going to concatenate. Now here's a little trick for you. This works in all programming languages. If you're using a plus or a dot, doesn't matter. But for PHP, if I know I want to put right there where my cursor is highlighting on the 1 there, then I will do this. I will say quote, dot, dot, quote. Or quote, plus, plus, quote if you're using JavaScript or something. And then the thing that goes concatenated goes right between there. That's just an easy way to keep your structure straight so you don't have a hanging quote or a hanging dot and you get, you know what I mean? Yeah, same idea. So we're going to do the exact same thing right here. I'm going to replace that with the x. So quote, dot, dot, quote. Done. Now I just know the x goes right in between. Okay? That's just an easy way to remember it. But now that is it. We refresh it and now we have exactly what we're looking for. And the cool part is, all I got to do is change that number to 10 and now I got a drop-down list of 10. Right? That's the power of PHP. Okay? That's a very teeny little tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg of the power of PHP. Okay, and again, you could pull that number out of a database. And then you don't have to do anything. You let the administrator who owns the company have access to the database. You build them an interface, and they can change that number and say, oh, today we want to have 10 games. And so they put the number 10, and poof, when we load the website, bam, it's got 10 games. Okay? So I should have done that with my PHP there, but in hindsight, I should have done that. Okay, but now what's this Family Feud game? You guys want to see it? Okay, let's check it out. Okay, so all the images are stolen from the actual show. So let's put the teams in here. Beavis and Butthead are the 2 players, and we'll go with game. Yeah. Yes, if you've watched my videos, you know. Now, I have printed out, like right here, if you click on rules and hotkey instructions, it's a whole set of documentation that prints out for the user that has all the rules on how to run the game. So I have the answer key right here, so I know the answers. But if I say let's feud, we'll play it with you guys. Let me get it open to the screen here, the answer key. And so if you know how the game works, you know, if you don't, go watch some YouTube clips of Family Feud. But 100 people were surveyed, top 7 answers on the board. Name one of Santa's reindeers. So name a reindeer. Rudolph. So now I have the hotkey and I know what button to push.
Survey said.
Survey says, ding, and then you see and Rudolph was number 1. So name another one.
Survey said.
Believe it or not, that's not actually on there. Funny. But you see it gives you a little buzzer and everything, right? And also when you get points, I just manually add the points here by doing single points or 10-point increments or whatever. Once you've done answering this and maybe you get through and nobody got all the answers, I can reveal all the answers. A little hotkey there that reveals the ones that nobody guessed. And then I can go on to the next question here and name a drink that might be served at a holiday party.
Survey said.
Eggnog, number 1 answer. Good. So this game's kind of ugly, I'll admit it. I'm not a great designer, but functionally it works. And it's a blend of PHP and JavaScript. And you can't do this in plain HTML. I could have done this in JavaScript, 100% JavaScript. The reason I chose not to do it in JavaScript is because I wanted the answers to be stored in a database that that's not just sitting in your DOM that people can see, right? And there are ways to do that using Ajax and server requests and Node.js and all kinds of stuff, but I'm already a PHP guy, so I figured why not? Plus it's for the PHP class. So there you go. Feel free to go to that link there, stonecoldhosting.com/familyfeud, and I'll let you get in there and do whatever you want, play the game if you want to. Fun, right? Exciting. Okay, any questions about anything we've looked at today? We good? Yeah, good question. Is PHP object-oriented? PHP can be object-oriented. Unlike Java, right? Java forces you with a gun to your head to be object-oriented. PHP does not. JavaScript is also object-oriented, which we will learn about this semester too. Well, yeah, but that you're right. The DOM is an object, but that's not the object-oriented part of JavaScript. You can actually create classes and instantiate objects and everything in PHP and in JavaScript, yeah. And we'll learn about that towards the end of the semester. Yeah, good. Other questions?